So the Phillies have locked in Jesús Luzardo to an $11 million contract avoiding arbitration. But the next question is, what does a contract extension look like with the starting pitcher who's set to be a free agent at the end of 2026? Let's talk about it next right here on the PHLY Phillies Podcast. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley here. And today I thought we would get into the conversation about what the eventual Jesús Luzardo contract would look like. As we talked about on yesterday's show, he's set to make $11 million, which is going to be the 50th highest AAV on a one-year basis for starting pitchers, which is a steal when you think about the pitcher that Jesús Luzardo is. But the long-term looming question is, do the Phillies offer him a long-term contract extension, and is he a member of the Phillies past 2026? And if so, what does that contract extension look like? Of course, you would like to be able to lock up Jesús Luzardo long-term before he hits free agency. You have a certain amount of time to do it. Usually players don't like to negotiate in the middle of a season, but you do have the next 8 or 9 months to try to figure that out, where you do have exclusive negotiating rights before he hits free agency. Now, inversely, players sometimes like to be able to hit free agency, especially if they have a good free agent previous season, to be able to test the open market and see what other teams are offering, entertain offers, go get wined and dined by the team at their facilities, and figure out what the best outcome for them is long-term. For the Phillies' sake, I think they would love to keep him. Dave Dombrowski has said while they haven't necessarily started those conversations, it's something that they would like to entertain. They would like to have Jesús Luzardo in the fold for quite some time. So, what does a contract extension look like? So I went back and I pulled 2 starting pitchers who have signed long-term extensions over the last 4 or 5 years to kind of get an understanding about what an extension may look like for Jesús Luzardo. Now, of course, dollars one-to-one aren't the same in 2022 or 2020 or whenever these players signed compared to what it will be in 2026. Contracts are always going up, but I do think that these 2 players kind of are good marking points for what a contract extension for Jesús Luzardo might look like. So let's look at mystery player number 1 to get an understanding of what a contract could look like for Jesús Luzardo after the 2026 season. All right, so mystery starter number 1 signed a contract extension after the 2021 season. So these are comps between that pitcher's 2021 and Luzardo's 2025. A few more innings than Luzardo for the mystery pitcher. ERA was probably the biggest difference maker, a 0.4 difference. And again, that kind of stems from Luzardo's 2 really bad starts against Milwaukee and Toronto back in the middle portions of the summer. Whip was in favor of the mystery pitcher, but Luzardo's 1.22 was not terrible throughout the year. Where Luzardo leads is in the strikeout category. Despite having pitched almost 9 fewer innings, he ended up striking out 12 more hitters. So this pitcher signed a 7-year, $131 million deal. Now, the one thing that this team and this pitcher were able to do in negotiations was kick out the final year of arbitration. And in that first year of eliminating the arbitration, this player had an $11 million salary, which is exactly the same as what Jesús Luzardo is going to make in 2026. But after that, the salary rose to $16 million, $18 million, 2 seasons of $19 million, and now there is an opt-out at the end of this season, or this pitcher could opt in for 2 years at $24 million total. So in total, with award escalators in there as well, this player signed a 7-year, $131 million contract extension. Now, it's not one-to-one comparing Luzardo to this pitcher because this mystery pitcher has basically been the model of consistency since 2016 when he made 26 appearances. Since that point, he's made 32 or more starts in 6 of the 7 full seasons and made all 12 of his starts in the COVID-shortened 2020 seasons. Now, the results have been varied throughout that stretch, and at times he dominates, and at times he struggles. But since being traded and signing with the team that he was traded to, he has posted a better whip than Luzardo's 2025 3 out of 5 times, but never struck out more than the 216 that Luzardo did last year. Luzardo also had an 8.2 hits per 9 number in 2025. This mystery pitcher was equal or worse than that 3 of the last 5 seasons. So when we put that all into context, you come out with an equation that is pretty equal, you know, of course, with the exception of what money looks like moving forward, but you put that into a perspective that's kind of equal to this point. So before I tell you who this mystery pitcher is, I want to ask Ethan how you feel about mystery pitcher number 1, getting 7 for 131, and where this player kind of compares to Jesus Luzardo after the 2025 season.
One to start, I mean, I did see who both of these mystery pitchers are. So I think in trying to strip name value of those pitchers, I do think that there are a lot of similarities in terms of the consistency of this pitcher. I think in terms of command and attack on the mound, I think Luzardo has been better in this point as of now, and since this player was after this deal was signed, and a little bit better beforehand. But still, I would not say to the same level as Luzardo. I do think this is a fairly reasonable comparison. I do think numbers-wise, I hope it's not nearly as much as what would be factor in now that time has gone on and players are continuing to ask for money and slowly creeping up the ladder.
So in total, that 131 for 7 comes out to be 18.7 AAV. Luzardo's going to get more than that.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fairly sizably more than that, probably in the $5, $6, $7 million per year, more than that range. So if this player was at 131 over 7, I don't think Luzardo gets a 7-year deal, but I could see a scenario where it's 5 for 125 and be in that $25 million a year range or so. And I think that's probably a comfortability where I can live if we're playing comparison to this guy. Now, this pitcher is Jose Barrios, who was with the Minnesota Twins, traded to the Toronto Blue Jays, signed the extension in Toronto. Now that you know who it is, I think you can look at it on, as you said, name value. And I think it's fair to say there's times where Barrios is nasty, and there's times where he's very gettable. And I think with Luzardo, he's had those 2 awful starts, but I think the baseline has been better for Luzardo in 2025, at least specifically, than it was for Barrios over the last couple of seasons. Now, Luzardo is going to be 29 years old when the contract is signed, the extension is signed. Barrios, meanwhile, at this current moment, is 31, which means that he was 28 when he signed that extension. So that probably will work a little bit against Luzardo in terms of how many years he gets, but that's probably a right-on comparison from it in terms of statistical comparison between the two. I think Luzardo ends up getting more than Barrios got back after the 2021 season. Now, the next mystery player got less years on their contract, but I think has more pedigree than Jose Barrios does. So let's take a look at mystery player number 2. This, again, was after the season before they signed their contract extension. Luzardo with 33 more innings pitched, but a near one ERA, difference, his 3.92 compared to this mystery pitcher's 2.97. Strikeout rates for that pitcher were good, 167 over 150 innings, but the number is limited because of the amount of innings that he pitched. Luzardo cleared him in innings, he cleared him in strikeouts. This pitcher, of course, had a better whip, signs a 5-year, $108 million deal. Now, this pitcher who signed the 5-year, $108 million deal also kicked out arbitration year 3 at, you guessed it, about $11 million before going to about $25 million per season. He also has a vesting option for a 6-year at 2025, which would eventually boost the final total to 6 for 133 if he pitches 180 innings in 2026, which is something that he's done 2 out of the last 3 years, but last year only pitched 180 2/3. So he was like right on the doorstep of that number. But if his number vests this year, he'll make that up to 6 for 133. There's also a team option for just $5 million if between last year and 2027 ends, he misses 130 games played due to specifically UCL injury, which is very unique language in a contract. But there is that option there. But I think the more realistic chance is that this guy ends up making his vested 25 and having a 6 for 133. When you look at the numbers that this guy posted right before his contract extension was signed, it wasn't a crazy year in terms of innings pitched or high strikeout total, but in 25 starts, he posted a sub-3 ERA. And that is something that Jesus Luzardo, at least in 2025, did not do. And we talked a million times about those 2 starts. He would have been much closer to it, but still would not have crossed that threshold. And in fact, Luzardo over a full season has never been under the 3 mark. So that this pitcher in specific holds over him. And again, the ability to kind of blow out that final year of arbitration at $11 million versus what a full free agent contract would look like. Those two things come into play. This guy, I think, nominally has pedigree. And I think almost you could argue has been extremely consistent in terms of the type of guy that he is. 3.3, 3.6, 3.5, at least 175 innings pitched each of the last 3 years. He 3 years ago did strike out 219 hitters, which is more than Jesus Luzardo's career high. This guy's also now going to be 33 at the end of the year, so expectations are lowered a little bit. But I think that 6 for 133 is probably more on par than the 7 for 131. If we put these two together, these two contracts, Ethan, together, which one feels like a more likely outcome? Him getting more years or him getting more AAV? Talking about Luzardo.
I would think, see, there are multiple different approaches to it because Luzardo is still a fairly younger player and has a little more to preach in terms that he has more to be consistent for.
He'll be 28 for almost the entire season.
Yeah, like there's, even 5 years still puts him at 33 and could still maybe not get a second better or worse contract after that.
And he's evolved as a pitcher, adding the sweeper this past season. I think working with Caleb Cotham is very real. It was his first healthy season since 2023 where he was really good. 24 obviously struggled with health and the numbers were not very good. But I think they got him on a fairly reasonable trade, sending Kaba and Boyd. And I think this is an opportunity for them to kind of meet a middle ground of a fairly sizable contract extension, but maybe getting him for cheaper than, in terms of, I shouldn't say cheaper, for less years than what some of the big time free agents are going to go for. If I had to give you a number, 5 for 125 feels in a good spot. If he wants the 6 year, I think you could go 6 for like 140, keep it a little bit lower than the 25, but go 6 for 140. But I think a contract extension with Jesus Luzardo feels like they need to get it done. And Barrios, and by the way, the second mystery pitcher was Luis Castillo from the Seattle Mariners, who has been extremely consistent and has changed his game as he's gotten older. His fastball velo's come down a little bit, and he's become a more well-rounded pitcher. He doesn't just go at you with the fastball as much as he used to, but he's become a much more well-rounded pitcher. If you compare the two contracts that Barrios and Castillo got, you probably live right in that range for Jesus Luzardo.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Castillo's through time, and I think even more so before this most recent contract was signed, I think has always been the model for consistency and probably was able to preach that a little bit more in his negotiations, whereas Luzardo has dealt with injuries prior. This to me feels like his first, maybe since 2 years prior to that, like his first legitimate season where he's pitching winning baseball and at a really, really high level. So I think that might be the one kind of question mark in the air for how both parties feel about where that should lie in terms of a monetary value.
If the Phillies offer 5 for 125, does Luzardo turn it down?
I'd really hope not.
I think he might.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I hope he doesn't, but I think he might. I think you're probably creeping up towards 5 for 135 to 145.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot more sense. And I would think 5 hopefully just makes a little more sense in the fact that you don't know where this core is going to be in 5 years. So I think he could kind of just be an outlier where he might just get traded again anyway, if depending on how things go. But I mean, that's much further down the line.
They also could potentially have flexibility in terms of giving him a little bit more because Christopher Sanchez's contract is one of the most team-friendly contracts in all of baseball. If Andrew Painter is the guy that they're hoping him to be, he'll still be pre-arb and arbitration for most of that contract. Zach Wheeler probably retires after 27. That's $40-some million. Aaron Nola's contract gets closer to closing out. You get off Taijuan Walker's $18 million after this season. I think they have the financial flexibility in years like 3, 4, 5 more than they do in year 1 for 2026. Or for 2027, excuse me. But if you want to keep him, you're just going to have to kind of eat that money in 2027, knowing you free up a lot of money after Wheeler and, presumably retires, after Nola's contract comes to a close in, I think it's 2028. I want to say. But either way, like you're starting to free up some cash. Now you're going to have to reallocate it to other guys, but I think that they would probably like to get in that 5-year range, and they would probably like to keep it at about 25. I think Luzardo gets more than that. So my final gut reaction would be 5 for 138, 5 for 140, something along those lines.
Sounds very similar to where I'd be. I think, 5, 135, maybe even, I think I'd like to end at like 5, 125, 5, 130, but I do think there is a little more to be said for Luzardo.
And pardon me, Nola's not a free agent until 2031. So there's quite a few years left on that one. But the Wheeler conversation still is real. And obviously you're hoping Painter can deliver on a pretty cheap price. So what does a Jesus Luzardo contract extension look like for you? How many years? What's the money you're comfortable giving him? And what do you think the answer is for Jesus Luzardo? Is he a Philly after 2026? We'll talk more on Monday about the inevitable money moving around between Bo Bichette, JT Realmuto, and so much more. We'll do it on the PHLY Phillies podcast. Have an excellent weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday at noon right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast.